Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Celts Are Here podcast. Today's a bit of a different format. We're going to be looking at Celtic's transfer window overall up until this point. We're approaching the end of July. There's been a lot of incomings, there's been a lot of outgoings, and we're going to chat through them, have a look at where the squad's at just now, guys, and get your thoughts on it. So today, I'm delighted to be joined by Patrick and by Quinny. Gentlemen, how are you both getting on?
I'm good, Declan. How are you?
I'm fine. I'm looking forward to getting back to what Ange called the real stuff. All this friendly nonsense is getting a wee bit in my nerves. I don't know what's your thoughts on that, Quinny, but we're kind of, it's almost as if folk don't have anything to moan about just now, because you can kind of watch a friendly game and just shrug your shoulders and say, that's it, stick the tail on or whatever. But yeah, I just went back to the real deal.
It's definitely thanks for having us on, by the way, Declan.
No, pleasure.
As well. Patrick, lovely to meet you as well. I think
Nice to meet you.
I think pretty much everyone of like our generation and even like younger has never had a pre-season where there's not been games, like competitive games. So it's a real strange, kind of summer for everyone. It's kind of new in a lot of ways. So yeah, I think we're kind of done with the appetizers now at this point, and we want to get the flag raised and get back on the pitch.
Yeah, I think the caviar or whatever it is people have when they go to these kind of things and their wee bits, wee salmons or whatever, they're done. We went straight to the soup and we want to get into the old league action. So yeah, we'll kick off. There's been three incomings, and again, there's been a lot of chat around this that we signed 3 players during this window that we already had in our books last season. The way I look at that, guys, is that before a ball was kicked, before the transfer window opened, these were not our players, so it's good to get them in, both at a very decent fee. Patrick, I'll come to you and Dyson Maeda first. He scored a cracking goal the other night against Legia Warsaw. There seems to be this myth developing, I almost think, about his technical ability. I don't think there's any issue with Dyson Maeda's technical ability, do you?
Not from the evidence that we've seen against Legia Warsaw. 2 great passes from Stephen Welsh and Rio Hatate, and obviously a great finish and a great run from Dyson Maeda. It's a bit different to Jota and Carter-Vickers in the sense where we had an obligation to buy, so he was definitely going to be ours. It was just a matter of time. And what a fantastic end to the season he had. If he can replicate that form in the coming season, he'll be an absolutely fantastic player for Celtic, and I'm no doubt in my mind that he'll start most games when fit. As you say, it's a great finish, and he brings something that no other player. Well, Kyogo to an extent, but the pace, the athleticism, just the constant running and the pressuring. It's something that only really Kyogo can replicate. But even then, Maeda really just is a level above, and glad that we've got him. Really.
Yeah, Quinny, I think Maeda is a guy that kind of typifies Ange's style of football, and I think it's important that you've got guys like that in there, especially maybe in Champions League games and stuff when you're going to be blowing out your backside at times. He's definitely somebody who doesn't give up, and in terms of just looking at him, he'd played that full season in the J League, came over here, made a storm, scored a lot of important goals for Celtic in that running, and it'll be good to see him after he's had that full pre-season under his belt.
Yeah, completely. And like the comments he's made himself is like that he's nowhere near showing us what he's fully capable of. And I think we all kind of know that and kind of easily forget it all at the same time, when we're kind of thinking about, in terms of this myth that's getting perpetuated that he's not that technically great and all the rest of it. Because, again, I couldn't really say too much on the whole transition from Japan to Scotland. It's not been said 1,000,000 times already before. But I think the key part is that he's, like you said, he's the manager's guy, and he's for, the manager's system is really what gave us the success last year. And like, yeah, there's individual players that were fantastic, obviously, but that was the thing the club was really missing since Brendan Rodgers was like an identity on the pitch. And him being, him along with a few other guys I'm sure we'll talk about, being like the lieutenants in the changing room for the tactics and for, the manager's philosophy. He's going to be fantastic for us next year. He's going to be one of these guys that we'll get to halfway in the season. It's kind of like Abada last year. We got to halfway in the season and everyone's like, Abada's looking good for 20 goals. So all of a sudden, how did this happen? And Maeda could easily be that guy again, or this guy that season.
Yeah, absolutely. Patrick, just kind of touching on the transfer fee, I think it's a snippet. It's around about kind of 2 million odd quid. Do you think this is possibly going to be the last kind of bargain that we get out the J League? Because surely they must be looking at us and think you're getting players far too cheaply now off of us. We're going to need to start bumping these up.
I think it could be. It's a matter of how many Japanese players we can actually fit in the team. We've already got 4, and they could. I don't think they've all started a game yet together. I don't think they've actually been on the park together at the same time yet. But it could definitely happen early this season because, Ideguchi was the one that wasn't really in there, but he's looking pretty sharp, pretty crisp. And obviously, he was sort of played with that injury in that first Scottish Cup game last season. So I think for anyone really looking to sort of jump into that market, they're going to be paying slightly more than what they would have paid 12 months ago because Celtic have, they've taken these 4 guys, they've done really well last season. They've had a couple of games in a decent stage on Europe and, rightly so, these Japanese clubs will be saying to themselves, we need to start upping our prices because these players, they're definitely more valuable, especially when a European club comes knocking. So I'm not sure how many more Japanese players we're going to sign. You never know. If there's a good player, there's a good player. But we certainly get 4 diamonds at the moment, don't we?
Yeah, I'm sure there's a few out there that probably Andrews they look at and they're well on Celtic's radar, but probably no more J League arrivals. I think during this window, especially, I think he's probably taken from that league what he fancies, and what we'll see maybe where else he looks towards. Quinny, to look at the big signing, you could say the first big signing of the window was Cameron Carter-Vickers, because the Maeda one just kind of came out. We've did the deal. That's it. He's done. He's in the door. But myself and Patrick, we were over in Dublin for the Scotland versus Ireland game, and we remember getting the tweet notification through to say we'd signed him. And this was one that I was particularly delighted about. In the sense, you'd heard the links with Newcastle and other Premier League sides. We know all about his transfer history with various different clubs, not really finding a place to settle. It could have been his big move, but he's picked to come to Celtic, and I think that says a lot about him as a player. And for everything he did last season, it was really important to get him in the door, I think, this season.
I think there's been a big kind of shift over like the youth culture in English football in particular over the last, let's say 3 or 4 seasons, really since Jadon Sancho, where a lot of these guys that come through the academies now at Tottenham, Man City, Chelsea, Arsenal, whatever, they want to get as much exposure to winning, to being successful, to getting trophies, to getting Europa League runs, Champions League group stage appearances, because that's what really has built other guys' profiles up in the game. And it's great that Carter-Vickers has chosen us, but as a big part of that is down to being in the Champions League group stages. Like if we weren't in that, there's no chance in a month for Sundays that he's picking us over like a mid-table Premier League team, just even financially as much as anything. We probably wouldn't have went to the extent of pushing the boat out to make sure we got him. And equally, he would have been probably a little bit less. So I think it's probably the biggest signing in that sense, because replacing somebody like him, it's great that the club and the managers have managed to pull these rabbits out of the hat constantly with some nifty transfers. But at centre-back, it's, it's not one you want to roll the dice on going into Champions League group stages and all the rest of it with the surgery that's been done, throughout the squad thus far. So I think Carter-Vickers has probably been just one of the stalwart signing that we needed, like the big foundation piece that says, yes, we are serious this year, we are going for it.
Yeah, I think foundation piece is probably the right way to describe him there, Patrick, in that, because obviously a great partnership with Carl Starfelt last year. And also I know we've splashed out £6 million on him, but the manager obviously thinks that Celtic could have went and looked at maybe a £2 million, a £4 million defender and brought 2 of them in for the price of 1. But he's looked at Vickers, known how important he is, and he's went for him. And again, I think it's all about that spine of the team, and it's important that you've got him in there, behind your Callum McGregor and whatnot, because that's going to be important going forward this season.
Yeah, he's part of a close-knit group, part of a winning team. He's forced a partnership with Starfelt, and somehow neither of them get any long-term injury last season. Both of them pretty much played almost every game from the middle of September through the end of the season. So, as you say, the manager was quite happy to say, look, £6 million, I'm quite happy with a player that I know, a player that I've had, willing to spend that money. And, I've already got Starfelt, so he completes the partnership and he takes that forward for at least the next 2 or 3 seasons, I would hope. Obviously, the Champions League, it's a step up. How he fares against the likes of Bayern Munich, Real Madrid, Man City, we'll see. It's a completely different level, and Celtic, it's all about keeping pride and trying to sort of nick a result. against these big teams, but when it comes to domestically, and if and when we drop down into the Europa League or the Europa Conference League in future seasons, that's the level that we can compete, and those are the players that we need to compete at that level. So, as you say, it was probably the one that we all wanted throughout the summer. It's probably throughout last season. Probably the more likely of the two signings between him and Jota. And we got it done really early. And I think that was a really important part as well, to get that done on, I think it was the 10th of June, Friday the 10th of June. That was really important in my opinion.
Yeah, I think it was vitally important. And again, Quinny probably his eyes in this World Cup coming up with the USA. I know he's was selected there towards the kind of the tail end there in June to play for the national side. I think I'll be having a look at that, and I think as you say, if they came out this window having not signed him and probably not signed two players up to his quality, we go back to that thing that Peter Lowell used to always say about a transfer window coming out stronger. If you hadn't brought him in, or two players similar to his ability, if you look back at that centre half position, currently still, I think there's probably questions being asked by some people. We've yet to see more exchange, but that was a really important signing, because if you look back last year, you had to bring Dane Murray and a like in there. I think it was really, really important to get him in.
It was. I just wanted to come back to something Patrick was saying there as well. Like, I actually found it quite odd. Like, I don't think that there was as much competition for Jota as there was Carter-Vickers, if you know what I mean, in terms of like the whole point when we were at the whole will they sign, will they not? When the ball was in the court of the player, in the sense that, like, we kind of knew Celtic were ready, they'd put the money down, and we were waiting for the player giving the green light. It did feel like Carter-Vickers, they were saying, like Newcastle, I think even there was rumours Conte even wanted to have a look at him in pre-season and stuff like that. Whereas with Jota, it just felt like he was just absent. It didn't really feel like, we're waiting for Jota to talk to Ajax and Benfica first or anything. It was just, no, Jota's in Vegas, all right, Jota's in Portugal now, or Jota's in Ibiza. It was just, he knew he was going to sign, kind of. I don't know. So I felt that Carter-Vickers we had to kind of really fend that one off a bit more. We had to really put the money on the table for him. Whereas I felt like Jota was on his jollies all summer, Go kicking about the Celtic top in New York and everything, you know what I mean? It just felt like he was just like, yeah, I'll be back, guys, don't worry about it. See you in a month.
Yeah, he was a very cool customer when we did the press conference with him, and I think he was aware to an extent, the kind of frenzy that he was, brewing up here, but he's not on social media or anything. So he said his mates kept saying to him, look at this, man, look at this, and he's like, well, if it happens, it happens type thing. But obviously with Carter-Vickers as well, it must have been done well before it, because there that day he appears in the brand new spanking away kit, so it must have been done well in advance of that. So yeah, delighted to get him in. I think he probably could be the buy of the summer. Coming to next, Patrick, freebie Ben Siegrist, know all about him, Dundee United goalkeeper. I think that was in a position that we really, really needed. I keep banging on about Joe Hart being our most important signing last summer, because you couldn't take him out the team, and if you did take him out the team, you wouldn't be confident in Scott Bain or whoever else got in there. So yeah, I think Siegrist, in terms of the squad, it improves the squad. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I agree with you. He definitely played better for Dundee United than what Scott Bain or Vasilis Barkas played for Celtic in the past couple of seasons. So it's a pretty low bar, really, isn't it? But no, he was actually quite outstanding for Dundee United, especially when he came up against, us and Rangers, who are the two top teams in the league, obviously. I'm hoping he can keep that form when he plays for Celtic, and he's not one of these players that sort of stand out against bigger teams, and then when it's sort of day-to-day business, sort of drops off a bit. But as you say, it's a position I think that we needed quite badly, because if Joe Hart get injured, we've seen it against St Johnstone in Boxing Day. Joe Hart sort of disappeared out the squad. Luckily, there was a sort of winter break, and Barkas came in and
made his contribution to the league.
got his winner's medal. I don't think he done anything wrong that day, but it's just one of those ones where you've absolutely no confidence, and you can actually see it in the team that the team doesn't really have confidence in the goalkeeper, and we obviously seen that in the 2020-2021 season. No confidence in the back four, no confidence in the goalkeeper. So even just to start off with confidence in your goalie, and then to have a backup goalie who's who can be trusted, certainly domestically, I think is really, really important. And we've obviously sent Barkas out on loan. Hopefully, Scott Bain can sort of revitalise his career elsewhere because, for me personally, I don't see him at Celtic, but fingers crossed Benjamin Siegrist is of a decent enough quality to be competing for the jersey.
Yeah, Quinny, the other night, Scott Bain get the captain's armband, which I found a bit strange. I also found it strange that it wasn't, but towards the end of the game, Cam McGregor gave him the captain's armband. But I thought, surely rotationally wise, Siegrist, but no, Siegrist came on against Blackburn. By the way, I thought he made a couple of really good saves against Blackburn Rovers. Looks quite cool with the ball at his feet, but it definitely goes in there as a number 2. I don't think there's anybody above Siegrist as a number 2. And just in terms of, do you think this is a bit of a stopgap signing? Because I know there's been a lot of chat around Toby Olubayemi coming through as a kind of Joe Hart replacement. Do you see it as a stopgap, or do, my perspective on it is probably the pick of the crop in the league? It's not lazy to go out and sign a player in your league, and I'm quite happy to get him in the door.
See, one thing I would say that, and I can't really speak to this in full, but it's just something to note at this point. Like Yokohama and like in Japan in general, like goalkeepers rotating is not an unusual phenomenon. Let's say, so Siegrist being a really capable like SPFL goalkeeper, is a valuable asset if that is maybe part of the thinking. Now, Joe Hart was ever present, and I don't think last season we could afford to rest him or anything like that, but. Goalkeeper, like, and forget age and whatever, right? But the thing with goalkeepers is when they get banged up, it's like impact stuff. They've done a big save and maybe smashed their shoulder off the post. And sometimes, it's little things like that. Sometimes having a little bit of easy relief to keep your best guy in the best nick is, a flex that good squads more and more modern football are doing. So I think he does give us something in that sense. One thing I really like about Siegrist is that he joined Dundee United when they were in like the lower league and stuff like that. And he's kind of like... He's a bit of a grafter, that guy. He's kind of started off and like really made a name for himself out of nothing. Come up to Scotland, a foreign country, and not even in the top tier division, to get into a decent club and try and make a name for himself in the game. So I feel that he'll be grasping this with both hands and see everything they're doing in training. He'll be doing it to the best of his ability 5 times over. And we all know the reputation that Stevie Woods has for goalkeepers. We've seen that with Arthur Boric thing, of course, and everything over the weekend. So I think it's a very underrated signing. It's probably quite a low impact signing in terms of what people will actually see. But like you say, it's better than having Bain and Barkas and the other boy's name. It takes a bit of pressure off him, and maybe even if we wanted to sneak him out on loan or something, then there's no real pressure for him to be on the bench and to be getting involved in cup games or anything. Yeah,
I think, Patrick, in terms of the goalkeeping position overall, we've moved Barkas out the door. Ross Doones went out the door permanently. Ross Doones away permanently. Barkas still the loan to Utrecht. It was a bit of a position where we just seemed to have too many people. Obviously, Hazard's out at Helsinki, but I think you could probably kind of nail down Hart, Siegrist, and Olubayemi as a three. It's definitely going to be hanging around the place. And I think Quinny says there, low impact signing, but it's one that definitely improves the squad. Ben Siegrist.
Yeah, no doubt in my mind. He certainly comes in. I think I agree with you. He's definitely number 2 in the rankings. I wouldn't say. I don't know about a stopgap. I think Olubayemi is meant to be Hart's successor, so that's at least, I would say, 2 years away, maybe even 3 years away. I could definitely see Hart staying an extra year. A stopgap in football now is probably 6 months. Maybe back in the day it was 2-3 years, but it's probably about 6 months these days. So I don't think it's a stopgap by any stretch. I can see him competing with Hart for the next 2 or 3 seasons. And then, it's a sort of mixture between the 3 of them, really, for that starting position. I think, as Quinny says, it's really a no-risk signing because you're talking about a guy who won't be in that big a wage in comparison to Celtic, and we obviously haven't spent a fee on him. So, yeah, and we know what he's capable of. As you've both said, it's not lazy to sign a guy in your own league. We know what he's capable of. It's not costing us a lot of money. There's no real losing here. So I was quite happy with the signing when we made it, and from what I've seen of him in the friendlies, he's quite competent.
Yeah, I think as well, with it being in a free, there's been a bit of criticism directed towards 2 guys that we're going to probably come on to talk about later, be Aaron Mooy coming in a free and whatnot. But there's obviously a set budget for Ange Postecoglou to work within. And this is one, you didn't need to go out and spend 2-3 million on a goalkeeper, get him in the free, and it works out. So yeah, definitely a big thumbs up to Ben Siegrist. Then it was you'll come on to our very first Argentinian signing. I know Patrick, you're like a Kilmes, you're a big Diego Maradona fan like myself, so you're happy with this one. And this was a position I think we badly needed depth in. And I don't want to say covered because I think both Bernabe and Taylor's going to retake quite a lot. And there's still, I think, he's only 21. I think there's still a lot of development to go in his game, but it's a good signing.
Yeah, totally agree. Back in February, I'd have said that any left back we signed for a decent fee probably walks into the team. But between February and May, Greg Taylor absolutely upped his game. He really adapted to Ange ball quite well. The sort of inverted fullback role, the crisp passing, the quick movement, and he was rewarded with a goal in the Scottish Cup semi-final in April. Obviously, we didn't get the result that day, but it sort of felt like it's almost like vindication or sort of justice, because he'd sort of been on this journey throughout the season where he was injured. He wasn't playing that well in January, February. Then he really comes on to a game towards the end of the season. So I agree. I think it'll be sort of 50-50 between those two. It'll be interesting to see who nails down the jersey, because I don't know if I'm a fan of switching game to game for the full season. I think you need to give both of them runs in the team, 10-15 games or so. But interesting to see, who appears to end up on top by the end of this season. But again, by all accounts, a fantastic signing. He's looked good in pre-season. Obviously, it's mainly about getting fitness, getting sharpness, and for him getting to know his teammates. But I think he'll be a decent enough signing for between 3 and 4 million.
Yeah, Quinny, obviously you spoke about the system earlier.
Easily.
Very, very important. It's important to Ange, and you could see in that kind of first couple of pre-season games, he was the one that was picking out because he was shouting and bawling at him. Because again, it's Greg Taylor's really adapted well to playing that inverted fullback role. It's not easy to, if you're used to, everybody describes Greg Taylor as a Kilmarnock fullback. He was that at one point, but he's a Celtic fullback now, and he's adapted to the role well. Bernabe will probably adapt to the role. It's 3.75 million. I think the biggest thing for me in this deal is Celtic once again looking at a different league and going in a different direction. That we've obviously got a connection there now in South America. The club scouts in South America now, that is a positive thing that we're doing, and you'll find gems there now, I think.
Yeah, for sure. I think the problem with Taylor is that he's kind of found this. I think what we got out of him the back end of last year, I think that's like his ceiling, right? And I definitely feel that he can continue, because if you think about what he was doing, it's not hard for Greg Taylor to keep that level of performance up. He's doing really well, but it's not beyond his ability. It's very much repeatable for him in terms of like the runs he's making, the tackles he's successful in, the ground he covers, the position he takes in the pitch off the ball, all that stuff. But for Celtic fans, that's not exciting. Having a guy that's 25 or however old he is, who's at his ceiling, and let's just hope he, keeps on being like 7 out of 10 or whatever we think that level is, Whereas having somebody like Bernabe who comes in, like who knows where his ceiling is. He's attacking as well. He's from Argentina. He's much more on the front foot. The manager's selected him along with the scouting department, so you expect that he's going to be, excuse the pun, but he's a bit more tailor-made perhaps for the left back role than perhaps Taylor is. And that's much more exciting to get behind. And I feel like that's maybe why we're all looking at Bernabe with, like the binoculars on, watching everything he's doing, and look at this, and checking it out. So it's just much more exciting, and I hope it works out. And if it does, go back to Argentina, shop again for footballers. Sounds like fun.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd like to join in that shopping trip. I also find it really cool that he's met Diego Maradona, Patrick. I mean, imagine you get to meet the great man. I think that's pretty cool. So yeah, I think that's a really good point, Quinny, and that there's a lot of development to go there. You don't know how high the ceiling will be. I mean, he likes to get forward, and Celtic, are based in that, attacking fullbacks in terms of guys like Tommy Gemmell, the only guy to score in 2 European Cup finals for Celtic. It's just a thing that's in Celtic's history, is get the fullbacks forward and bag goals. So hopefully we see Bernabe get a few goals this season. Just to kind of flip that, Patrick, from the eyes of Bernabe to balling goalie. We've got him out permanently. He's away to Belgium. It was one I think that was probably a lot of people's reaction in that one. we had to get him out the door because it just, everything that happened through that COVID season, them getting shipped out right away due to all that. I imagine he caused a lot of disruptive in the dressing room. He got his chance under Ange. He actually didn't, do anything wrong. I don't think in those two games at Fir Park and the Tony Macaroni Arena, but it just wasn't going to work out. I don't think for Bolingoli and like Ayeti and Julian, these were guys that we'd signed in for decent fees and needed to get off the wage bill and out the door.
Yeah, I agree. He probably isn't one of the highest earners in the club, but he'll be on a decent wage. And
I think we signed him for about £3 million odds, so he'll be in a decent wage.
Yeah. Another one where you've made a bit of a loss on him. It's quite strange because Celtic never announced it, and there was never a fee even rumoured. So quite a strange one.
Probably something $1 million quid
in that ballpark, and good to get him off the wages. Good to sort of move a player on because he's got his fans on Twitter, that's for sure. And I think outside of those, I think we all knew it was done after that sort of drama 2 years ago, because as much as he came onto a game in spells in his first season, he was always a bit of a risk, and he was never one that you could fully trust. Then he does that in the middle of a pandemic, in the middle of the most important domestic season in like 10 years. It was done 2 years ago, and he was given his chance under Ange. It's a bit of a mystery as to why it never really worked. I know Ange likes good people as well as good players. You need to want to play for Celtic, you need to be in the right mindset. Maybe that was the problem with Bolingoli. It's probably my best guess as to why it never really worked out, because as you say, in those two games, it wasn't brilliant performances, but he did play relatively well in those two games. But just good to move another player on, really, because it's a bit like a Yeti, Soro, Barkas. These names we've been repeating for the last 6 to 12 months, just guys that we're wanting out the door.
Yeah, I think we're getting a bit bored actually kind of talking about some of them now as well. So yeah. I think that was one you wanted out. Just kind of Quinny, a more positive note, two guys that we've saw featured at left back for Celtic, whether they're left backs or not is another question, is Liam Scales and Adam Montgomery. In terms of Liam Scales first, he's getting rave reviews. His performances up at Pittodrie, by the way, he's not played any too tough opposition. It's kind of lower league Scottish sides, but he's been playing at left centre half, and that there possibly could be a future for him coming back to Celtic. But again, I'd rather judge him when he's up against your Hibs, Hearts, maybe not Hibs. The way they're going, maybe not Hibs. The Hibs, Hearts. The teams are talking about the kind of top six, the top six teams in the league, to see how he gets on there. But he's a player that you want to do well, and obviously Celtic's had a good track record of getting players out and loan in the league, getting them back in, and thinking about Ryan Christie and Chris Ida, that kind of ballpark. But we'll see how he gets on. But do you possibly see a future for Liam Scales coming back? Maybe not a left back at Celtic.
I'm a big fan of Liam Scales, to be honest with you. Like, I play fantasy football stuff, and Liam Scales is one of these guys I'm trying to keep quiet on because he's not getting any cards at the moment. But I think Liam Scales, like I seen him come off the bench for Celtic last season. I can't remember where it was, but it might have been a Europa League game or something. And it's one of these wee things. It's really small intangibles. He only touched the ball maybe about 5 or 6 times, but I thought, oh yeah, I think this guy's a bit of a player, So I'm relishing watching him at Aberdeen this year. I hope he does really well. And you won't really see what he's made of, like we've seen it with Christie when he was at Aberdeen, and like Ayer, in the big games when they step up and they do some stuff. That's when we'll get the idea of if they're worth taking back in and having a look at. But I think Scales he's definitely got. I don't know. I think he's got a wee bit of that. Because again, he's one of these guys that's had to kind of, similar to Siegrist, like kind of fight his way. He's coming through in the League of Ireland. They had some European appearances and whatever. So guys like that are always ones that are going to be working hard to keep at the level that they've got to, with the aspiration of moving on. And guys that are motivated like that, like Ajay is the absolute opposite of that. He is at Celtic on big money, and he's just like a parachute. Just where will that land? Where will that land?
Sunglasses, by the way. Yeah, these are cool.
I've not seen his sunglasses. I don't think, unless it's big popular ones.
No, well, in Trophy Day, that's what he was rolling about in. Everybody else is kind of jumping about and whatever else, and he's just strutting about, like he's in, an X in The Godfather or something. Sunglasses on, so.
I thought it was a pre-season thing, sorry. But so like players like that, like when they go out, like I'm always eager to watch them, and I've got a good bit of faith that Scales will have a good season.
Yeah, one to keep an eye on. Patrick, ever the one me and you always debate about, but I do think he's going to be a player is Adam Montgomery. He got his first goal for St Johnstone the other night. I think that's a really good move, and I'm really excited to see how he gets on. I'll be keeping an eye out for him in sports scene. He's only 20. I think there's a possible chance that you might see him as a first team Celtic player in a good few years.
Yeah, I hope so. I liked him when he first came on the scene. I was adamant he's a left back. I'm still adamant he's a left back. I suppose we'll see this season because I can see him playing a lot for St Johnstone. He went to Aberdeen and we thought he would play a fair bit, but then he got an injury. I think February, March time. So I can see St Johnstone having a much better season this season than what they did last year because they really struggled for the first 2/3 of the season really, and then in the final third of the season they really kicked on. Couldn't quite escape the playoff, but they absolutely thumped Inverness in that playoff game. They should have won both legs. So I can see them having a decent season, and I can see him definitely being part of that. I can see why you think he might be a left winger because he's a very attacking player, and there's no doubt he's been told to be like that. In the academy.
I think he'll be moulded. He'll
coming
be
through the
moulded this
ranks.
season into whatever position he's going to be.
Yeah.
And
So-
it probably will be a left back at St Johnstone.
Aye. So whichever position he ends up playing, fingers crossed he can make it.
Yeah, I hope he can because we like Celtic youth players coming into the team and making their mark, and it seems like a good move. And again, I'm in agreement with you that I don't think St John's will have anywhere near as bad a season as they did last year, and they actually probably did the right thing keeping Callum Davidson on. They kept in the league, but for the complete overhaul of the team as well. So it's a fresh start, I think, for everybody up in Perth. So we'll see how young Adam Montgomery gets on up there. Sticking to the theme of the left-hand side, another man that came in, we've already mentioned him, Quinny was Jota. Again, it was another big, huge sigh of relief when this one was announced, but it was one that I think towards the end of it, it's going to happen. It's going to happen like daily updates from newspapers, press it. He's spoken to somebody, he's did this, blah blah blah. Got him in. It was absolutely vital for us last season. 13 goals, 14 assists in 40 games. He was, he's one that gets bums off seats, which is what you want at Celtic Park. And I'm excited to see him in his second season at Celtic. And if he's doing flicks like he was at the weekend against Blackburn, bring it on.
Yeah, I think he's like. I think the thing with Jota, I was chatting to somebody else earlier on today about like Scott Sinclair and stuff like that. Scott Sinclair made a really big impact when he came to Celtic, right? But Jota is like, again, it's kind of similar to what I was saying about Burnaby, I suppose. Like his ceiling is still going, and that level of talent he's showing is just so exciting. And Europa League last year wasn't great, right? But there was some good matches, some good spells in games, some good goals and whatever. There was, not to go off on a tangent, right? But there was a season with Ronnie Dylan in the Europa League where I think we drew like 5 games and lost the other one or something.
The one with Fenerbahce and all that in our group.
Fenerbahce, Ajax, Molde.
Yeah,
I think every one of those games, I might not be totally right, but I think every one of those games we were winning every match at some point. We went 1-0 up in every game, and that's the way it went. And it felt like last season there was maybe just a wee bit of that where we're missing 10% of maybe depth or familiarity with some of the players that were coming in and transitioning, international duty and all the rest of it. So I think for Jota, Kyogo, Rio, Maeda, I think there's going to be, honestly, we're going to get, I think if this pans out the way I expect it to, you're going to see like all these analyticals coming out about how amazing Celtic's attack is this year, how effective we are at taking chances, how the link-up play is, how successful we are. Because, again, we didn't see an ideal situation for any combination of forwards last year, ever. Until maybe the last 2 or 3 games. It was like Juranovic playing right wing against Ross County, whatever. And you know what I mean? Like Kyogo was amazing, but nobody was playing with him. And then he was injured, and then Giacomakis was amazing, but Maeda was away from international duty, and it's always something. There was no period where they all got together in good fettle and good form and ran for 10 games. So I expect and Jota for me. You can question Maeda for this. You can question, these players but Jota is absolute stardust. Like anything can happen when he's on the ball. And he can beat anyone one-on-one. He can play any sort of dangerous ball we need into the box. There's no question about him having the ability to do that.
Yeah, he's a silky football player, and I'm really looking forward to it. And again, Patrick, we'd heard from everybody in Australia, talking about Ange Postecoglou he only really gets started in his second season. And you know what Quinny's talking about there, all those different players, it's really, really exciting because he's definitely one of them. And again, we've shelled out, in terms of Celtic, transfer fees a large fee, but you make that money back, absolutely no bother. And when his parent club fans are raging, you've got a player in your hands, because Benfica fans did not seem best pleased when he made that permanent move to Celtic.
Yeah, they seemed sort of bemused at the time when they found out that the buyout was sort of only 6.3 million or something, whatever it was. And they said, "Oh well, that's a bit low." And then when we went to sign him, they were like, "This should actually be 2 or 3 times higher. This is some player we had in our hands." And a Benfica fan as well, and they've absolutely let him go. I mean, they've made up that money in the Darwin Núñez transfer to Liverpool, right enough. They're not short of a couple of quid, or Benfica, but they've lost a decent player who he probably could get into the Benfica team. I think Celtic and Benfica are of a similar level. That's just
I agree.
Porto are probably the top team in Portugal at the minute, but fantastic signing. He's as vital as Carter-Vickers is. They're both probably equal in terms of importance, but as Quinny says, the stardust, the flair, the bums off seats sort of thing. It's the one that you want more, even though they are both important. It's hard to see how it can possibly go wrong. We've got a 5-year deal. You're basically saying, get another 2 years and then sell them or something, or even better, get the 5 years and let them walk away. Whatever way we do it, it's hard to see it going wrong. And delighted we've got him over the line. It's sort of hard to believe because you've had these loans in the past. You've had Robbie Keane, Craig Bellamy, Roberts to a lesser extent. The fee probably just wasn't worth the player. Elyounoussi as well. You've got these sort of star-studded attacking players on loan, and you could just never really imagine Celtic signing them. But this time we've went and done it, and you've arguably got a world-class striker in Kyogo, and then Maeda and Abada sort of supporting cast. It's incredible, and if Australian pundits and Australian football fans are to be believed, we're actually going to get better this season. So it's really exciting times.
Yeah, but I think we will get better this season. Just, I think back to the point that Quinny made at the top of the show about, having that pre-season. We've never been in this position. Plenty of time to work on things. Again, I'm not looking too much into pre-season games. I'll judge Celtic by the end of the season, but I think we will get better, which is a really exciting prospect. Just in terms of kind of wingers, Quinny, we've seen James Forrest be featured quite a lot for Celtic in pre-season, obviously given the new deal. Just in terms of looking at this, in terms of the depth, the squad, Jota likely to play on the right of a front three if Maeda's going to play on the left. Obviously, Abada, you trust no bother again. He's one of those players like Bernabei and Jota too that's going to develop even further. He's only 20 years of age. But Forrest at this time, I think there's a lot of Celtic fans, and rightfully so, are maybe asking questions just because he's not played a lot of football in 2 years. He's getting on a bit. Listen, I think he can still do a job domestically for Celtic in games, but if you're looking at squad depth and possibly an injury to say Jota and or maybe Maeda, you might be left with a situation where you're going to maybe need to play James Forrest against a top team in the Champions League, which, listen, he's been there and did it before. He scored in the Champions League group stages for Celtic, scored a lot of important goals in qualifiers, but probably a position I'd still say we maybe need to sign another winger, or a winger that can play through the middle, because I just think we're maybe one player short up top just now. What's your thoughts on that?
I would probably disagree. I think it takes a lot to happen for James Forrest to be required for a Champions League game at this point. Like, if you say Jota's injured, you can play Kyogo wide and put Giakoumakis through the middle, which kind of cures some of those ails. Even Rio Tate, if you were so inclined, you could stick out a left wing kind of idea and just have him running up and down doing this. If you were really pushed, I think Forrest getting the new deal was one of these things where it's like kind of similar to the way McCarthy's kind of working out, and Taylor and some of these guys, but it's like, you're going to be here for the next 2 or 3 years. You'll play away to St Mirren in the League Cup. You'll play at home to Ross County in a dead rubber game that blah, blah, blah. And they're just there for squad relief and just for some rotation. And Forrest, like, if he's not required to really start more than, like, say, 7 games throughout the season in all competitions, he should be in really good nick. And James Forrest in really good nick, who is against lesser opposition is an effective enough player to have around. But again, it kind of comes back to the Celtic fans. That's not exciting. We would rather have somebody who's 19 coming out of the academy to do that job, or somebody who's that. So that's really the issue. It's not. I think Forrest is more than capable of doing that, and maybe he's more expensive for that kind of role than like a kid out of the academy should maybe give the minutes to. But I'm not worried about him. I don't think I think it would take a lot for a crisis situation and us to be stuck with Forrest and going, oh, why didn't we buy another winger? I don't think that's
Yeah, that's a fair comment. Patrick, what's your thoughts on it? Because you know what, me and you had disagreements with this. You know, I'm quite a fan of James Forrest. You yourself wouldn't give him the new deal. Although I would say, with the new deal, I do imagine he's on lesser wages because he couldn't have been earning anywhere near what he was for, as Quinny says, the amount of games he's actually going to play.
Yeah.
Do you think we still maybe need an attacking player? Because I was listening to Peter Grant the other day, and he possibly thinks that, a player like James Forrest or Michael Johnson's only kind of there to make up the squad numbers for the Champions League, 25 numbers you're going to need. And kind of between those two, I think it'd probably be Michael Johnson's last chance season at Celtic to really make it if he's going to make an impact. What's your thoughts on it? Can you trust these two, or do you still need to go out and buy an attacking player that can maybe play in the wing and through the middle?
I'd love us to sign another player, but I think I agree with Quinny. It's not. I think it would take a serious amount of bad luck for us to have to play Forrest in a game like that. You've got. I think it's. Apart from a League Cup game, you're basically playing one game a week for the first 4 weeks.
Yep,
and then you've
Champions League. Yep.
And then you've got 3 Champions League games 3 weeks in a row. Then you get the international break, and then another 3 Champions League games 3 weeks in a row. So unless we get 2 or 3 injuries really early in the season in those attacking positions, I don't think we're going to see James Forrest having to start a game. Not only that, you'd probably get 5 players ahead of him to play 3 positions. So you're talking at least 2 injuries.
Kyogo, Yakimakis, Jota, Abada,
Maeda.
Yeah.
Those are the 5 I'd say. I wouldn't put Michael Johnson ahead of Forrest. I'd put Forrest ahead of Johnson personally.
I would too.
And I agree with you. It's probably his last chance. I think it would have been his last chance last season if he didn't get injured. But probably this season, you're getting to a stage where he's 23 and he scored goals for Celtic. Not particularly important goals.
I don't think he scored for Celtic though in 2 years. That's something I read the other day.
December 2019, Ross County away.
4-1.
Aye.
I've got a feeling Michael Johnson will get a loan.
You think so?
I think the manager likes him, and I think this whole pre-season he's got a fair amount of minutes. I think a bit of that's like shop window footage a wee bit. Like, take him on loan for his look. He's looking good, Because Michael Johnson came out, I don't know if you've seen these comments, but he was like defending himself. He's like, everyone thinks I'm this broken, injured player. He's like, I've never been injured my whole career until like this little section. So I think there's that kind of solidarity with Michael Johnson, the manager of the club, in that sense. And I don't know, I've got a feeling I wouldn't be surprised if like over the next 2 or 3 weeks we see he ends up in like Belgium or Austria. I think he'll go somewhere quirky on loan, like Jack Hendry did. I think he'll do something like that.
Yeah, well, I think he definitely needs minutes, and that's been an issue. And I don't think Celtic can offer him minutes at this point in time because we've lined off 5 players that you put well ahead of, Mikey Johnson or James Forrest in that category. But he's got plenty of time left in his deal. Even though we're saying there that this might be the make or break season, a loaning coming back maybe after making an impact in a foreign league or something could do him the world of good. So it's one to maybe look at. And again, going back to the question I posed there to both of you about strikers or wingers, I think maybe as long as Albion Ayeti's still hanging about the building, Celtic might not look to bring another striker just because of the wages I imagine he's on, and just kind of making up the squad. Because if you probably bring in another striker, you're definitely saying to him, your time's up here. I think we all know that as fans. He got his chance last season. He contributed a bit to the league. He scored two important goals. I think it was against Ross County in the 3-0 game. So. But I don't know what your thoughts is on that, Quinny. What do you think about Ayeti? DC Celtic bringing in a striker before we get him out the door?
No, I think we're still needing. I think we're needing like Mikey Johnson to be resolved in the sense that I think he'll get a loan or something. Ajeti, I think they're desperately trying to get rid of him. Obviously, Bolingoli, we've now resolved that, and Julian. So Julian and Ajeti, I think we're waiting on those 2 guys getting resolved because. if you notice, like Aaron Mooy at the press conference, I listened to it yesterday or something like that. He said like the deal turned around in 5 days or something like that. You know, from when he was available to sign, it was a really quick turnaround. And in that time is when Bolingoli left. You know, so as you say, it wasn't overly well reported, the Bolingoli exit and stuff like that. And it does feel like it's a wee bit of old Celtic creeping in here, but it's one in, one out. And with us still waiting on Julian to actually leave, and we're still waiting for somebody to be interested in a Jetty. You know, these rumours of these kind of star players that haven't really happened yet, like Vinicius Souza and Michu and whatever. It feels like maybe what's stopping us from that boat push signing again is some of these big, you know, dead weights that we're kind of still carrying on the budget, I feel like. So I think once we get, I don't think we'll get another signing until those two guys happen somehow, you know, a Jetty and Julian being.
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't see it happening until you probably get guys like that off the wage bill. Just kind of, you know, in contrast to Michael Johnson still at the club, Patrick Bailey's went out to Brest permanently. He's left Celtic. Me and you've spoken about this in podcasts before. You know, it was a big letdown, but the hype that was around Callum Bailey didn't get a lot of minutes last season. But he was a player that needed to play football. He's going to still develop. He's only 19, and I'm interested to see how he gets on over in France. But again, I think for his sake, you know, he probably had to get out because, just as we're said there about the attacking players at Celtic, he wasn't going to be guaranteed any minutes at this point in time.
No, you know, we all thought it's hard to say. I think when you hype a player up from the age of 13, I think it's destined to fail actually, because I think it was probably quite inappropriate of both the club and of the fans, you know, to say, "Oh, this 13-year-old in the academy is going to be the next Messi." You know, it's probably not the best idea because, you know, just look at it. You're sort of constantly wanting more from a guy who, you know, the weight of expectations unreal. No, I think, you know, last season, you know, I think the league was done by January last season, and he never really got a game. And then, you know, Lennon left and Kennedy came in, and you think to yourself, well, now he's going to get a game, and he still never really played. And then this season he gets a nasty injury. Comes back in February, and you think to yourself, well, he's going to get a game, and he still doesn't get a game. So personally, I think there's something in training where he's either not applying himself, you know, he wasn't getting the game time he wanted, so he sort of chucked it in a sense, or he's not as good as the hype, which, you know, is fair enough because, you know, the hype around him was unreal at a certain point 3 or 4 years ago. So to live up to that, you know, it's just not fair. So, you know, Brest is certainly an interesting one. It's not, you know, it's not one of France's top clubs, not at the moment anyway. So
The mid-table
won't be that much expectation on him, which, you know, might be what he needs. You know, a decent enough team. He scored a couple of days ago in pre-season, I've seen.
Nice.
So interesting to follow his career. You know, I'm not massively hung up on it. Maybe a few years ago I would have been, but I just think the expectation was probably too much. And, you know, when you were watching him, he didn't look like, you know, he's 19 or 20 now. He didn't look like, you know, Messi did in 2007. You know, he's not a wonder kid. You know, he's a decent enough player. So not that bothered by it.
Yeah, I think he'll have a good career. The one I'm probably maybe 4 years time, say, but we can look at him and Abada together and see where both careers have went and how they've worked out. That'd maybe be an interesting thing to do. Quinny, you've already mentioned Aaron Mooy. I spoke to him yesterday at the fan media press conference. Really nice guy, really humble. Seems really hungry to do well. I think this is a really low risk signing, is the way I'd put it. I know we were linked to Vinicius Souza. I've said again, you know, if I've offered everything on the table for Souza and he's picked La Liga over Scotland, there's not really a lot we can do about that because, you know, he's going to one of the top leagues in the world. We're going to play for Espanyol. We've did a quick turnaround, as you've already mentioned. You know, Aaron Mooy said he was happy at how quickly the deal got done. I've saw all sorts of horrendous takes about, you know, Mooy and that he's not getting a game in China and all that stuff, which is nonsense. The reason why he's not played... The reason why he's not played since February is because there's been COVID shutdowns over there, and he'd never kicked the ball competitively since February just because of that. But one thing, kind of things that stood out for me yesterday was he was asked about, you know, the position in midfield. I know a lot of people are talking about Celtic signing a number 6 or whatnot, but he said he'll play in any position the manager wants him to play in. He's played in a double kind of pivot before. He'd mentioned that, and you know he likes to get forward too. So this is one I'm excited about, and I think could maybe be the the underrated one in the window, even though we all know his name. I don't think a lot of people are expecting too much for him, whereas I think he will become an important player in Postecoglou's team.
Yeah, for sure. And when you listen to all these people that like kind of follow Postecoglou quite well and everything, they always talk about like that kind of evolution from season to season. And again, one thing I know from following the J League over the last couple of years is Yokohama's primary formation is 4-2, maybe 3 if you want to call it that, but it's kind of 4-2-1 and then 3, if that makes sense. So it's 2, that double pivot thing. So I also found it very interesting that he specifically mentioned that he played double pivot like when he was like younger. He did kind of say he was giving his kind of history of his career. You know, I did this, I did that,
I think he called it double six. He called it, yeah.
But my ears picked up when I heard that because I thought, you know, that's been a part of a conversation somehow that's came out in that press conference, because everyone else is talking about, is he playing the Callum McGregor role or playing this? So for him to say that, I think, you know, I always look for little tales like that. So I think that may be something we see evolve through the season. It might be something that happens right at the back end. I thought we might have seen a wee glimpse of it in the last game of the season. We didn't. But if that is the way the club is going to evolve, then Edeguchi's role might become a bit different, as might James McCarthy's, as might then in that kind of attacking midfielder position, you've got, you know, a different role kind of for the likes of O'Reilly, Turnbull, and maybe Rio. And if you get to that situation where you play the way Yokohama do now, where you've got 4 attackers, which, you know, now we've got 3, but you can kind of argue the whole team's body attacking at this stage, really. But if you have, like, even the way we're playing now, had an extra attacker somehow into the mix, like, I think that might be the barnstorm football that everyone's kind of saying is, oh, Postecoglou, when he gets going, this is what happens. So Mooy might be a tell. Like, it's something we might get in 3-4 months' time when he's really up to speed fitness-wise and integration-wise. And that may be something that comes of it.
Yeah. Patrick, in terms of, you know, what I've said, low risk, he said yesterday, one of the questions I asked him was about, you know, how he's kept himself fit, and he's been working with the Australian national team trainer. Something else I thought that was really, really interesting was he said that his family have never actually went to China with him. So I think his missus has been staying over here, you know, during his time in China, which is quite interesting. So, you know, he knows Glasgow well, not to say that old Peter Lawwell line, he knows the city, but he does know Glasgow. He's been here and he's worked with the manager before, and I think that's maybe going to be very, very important in terms of just the way that we work to do things, because, you know, Aaron Mooy coming in, a player that's saying I'll play in any position, is going to be important for Celtic this season, because we're going to rotate in there. And again, if we look at kind of the squad overall, we were all maybe saying we needed to sign a defensive type midfielder, but if you get Yusuke Edeguchi on form that we know can play there, Callum McGregor can go in there, and if Aaron Mooy can go in there, which he's been doing for Australia, you'd possibly argue that we've improved the position. Beaton's went out, Soros will be out in a loan deal. I think we might be done in there. I don't know. I know there's been other links to other players, but I don't know if we'll look to sign another midfielder. What's your thoughts on that?
Yes, it's quite interesting. I'm not quite sure. You know, Ange certainly knows what he's getting, because he's worked with him before. As you've both, you know, outlined, that double pivot really is quite interesting, especially in Europe. You know, and domestically, you could see it as sort of like a waste. You know, having 2 guys so deep when, you know, teams are putting 10 or sometimes 11 men behind the ball. But especially in Europe, when you watch back goals that we've conceded, it's the defence in the midfield looks very disjointed. There's like a lot of gaps, in my opinion, when you're looking at these goals that we concede. You know, when you look at Copenhagen's equaliser, sorry, not the equaliser, when they score immediately to make it 2-1 at Celtic Park a couple of years ago, it was really, really evident, because Julian punts it long, comes straight back to him, and then it's like 4-on-3 or something, and they just, you know, they end up making it 3-1 or something. So I think you really need to work as a unit, especially in Europe. You need to be really, really tight. And I don't think we've seen that. I think, you know, we're a bit naive in Europe, really, at times. You know, we leave ourselves open a bit, and you get away with it 9 times out of 10 domestically. You sort of leave yourself with the 2 centre-backs domestically, and Starfelt and Carter-Vickers can really deal with it most of the time. But when you've got guys like, you know, is it Florian Wirtz, you know, 19-year-old for Leverkusen, you know, they picked us off, really, and it was never a 4-0 game last season, but we just left ourselves open, in my opinion. So if we can have that double pivot and be a bit more compact, a bit more physical as well, you know, I know he's 31, he can play sort of anywhere in the midfield, but he's an experienced player. He's a quality player. He's played in the Premier League. He's played at international level. So you get a quality player with experience and leadership. And as we discussed, earlier this week, we're missing Beaton and Rogic in that midfield. So you need to bring in these leaders. Ange said beginning of last season he wants 4 or 5 captains really, with one taking the armband. So it's a bit like Seacrest. It's like it's a risk-free signing really. You don't really lose out that much. It's only really wages, and when you've got guys like Ajeti weighing the club down with his wage, it's a low risk signing.
Yeah, I think it's a low risk signing, and I hope he does do well. Quinny, in terms of just that midfield, obviously Patrick's mentioned Tom Rogic's went out. I think we've maybe got a ready-made replacement in Matt O'Reilly for him. Beaton's departed. Other guys who didn't really make any first team appearances competitively, that would be Kieran McInroy's, Luca Cono. All these players are out the door. I think we're probably set for midfield just now, and it's actually quite exciting because if you get guys like Rio Hatate, who the other night I thought was absolutely fantastic in that first half, if they're on song, the midfielder on the night completely ran the show. And if you're going to play like that and you're adding an Aaron Mooy to it, you've got a bit of teams won't be able to cope with us. And even when we go into Europe, you've got another option to play that double pivot with McGregor and Mooy in there. If you need to, at the Gucci's here, do you expect Celtic to look at any other more midfielders?
I think Patrick made a really good point about it maybe being the European formation we use. That would be interesting, and we've not had any qualifiers that would tell that, so that's a really interesting point. It'd be interesting to see that. I don't think there's any more room. So I think with Mooy, what we've basically done is, like, let's say worst case scenario, he's just as good defensively and as useful to as Beaton was last year, and he's just say best case scenario, just as good offensively as maybe Rogic is. Also, he's the one guy, So I think with him being, and I know he was in China for a year or two, right? But for the large part of his career, or the main body of his career to this point, he's been a Premier League player. If you look at see when Matt O'Reilly showed up, and I said this kind of earlier with Scott Sinclair, but Matt O'Reilly came from League One England, being like a kind of up and coming midfielder. As soon as he showed up here, like, he was of the level of the SPL already, And I know he's been in China for a year or two, whatever. But the standard baseline for success in this league is, like, let's say it's 6 out of 10 or whatever. His standard baseline for success to get into the team in a Premier League outfit is 8 or 9 out of 10 in terms of success on everything you do, pass completion, decision making, all that stuff. So when you come into that environment, obviously our environment at Celtic is really high as well because we're the best team in the league and we are playing in Europe and everything. But playing at home, let's say Mooy makes 12 home appearances this year and like 6 away starts. This is 6 away starts and let's say like 18 at home, or no, not 18, 14 at home and 6 away, 20 in total. He will be head and shoulders one of the best midfielders in the league in every one of those games in terms of like the weekend. If you look at who's done the most amount of tackles, ran the most yards, made the most passes, all that stuff. So I know it's again underwhelming because again he's probably at his ceiling. He can't really get any better than the way we're finding him. All we're going to do is discover how good he is. And again, we always want people with ceilings we can push up, like Matt O'Reilly and Rio Hatate. Like, I can't wait to see these guys actually plugging and playing together and having a full season together again, because O'Reilly only just showed up, as did Rio. But no, I don't think there's any more room in midfield because of how versatile Mooy, Ideguchi and McGregor is now. The guys that are less versatile, like Turnbull, O'Reilly, maybe Rio to an extent, you might argue, we're just well padded now. So I think, like, in terms of any new signings, I think once we move on, like the Julian and the Ajeti, either one, ideally both, I think then the manager just goes out and it is like a Mishu we're looking to sign. Somebody who is like Jota level in terms of like we should be pushing the boat out to get the best guy, because the squad at that point is perfectly round. There's 2 to each spot everywhere in the formation we're currently in. So once we move on Ajeti and Julian, if you want to include Jens as being the backup centre-back to Starfelt and Welsh as the backup to Carter-Vickers, which seems to be the manager's preference, then it is it's just a crown jewel piece again. We can just go out into Europe and go, right, we've got 10 million to spend, 20 grand on wages. Who can we get? Who's the best guy going? Because like Ajax have done with Bassi, and sorry to bring this up, right? But when Ajax spend 27 million or 22 million or whatever it is on Bassi, Ajax can now sell him for 40 million so much easier because they spent 22, you know. So again, we are starting to take that approach with the Carter-Vickers and the Jota signings because we might want to sell them. So spending 7 million, spending 8 million isn't really an issue because that'll get factored into the exit. So I think that signing we go for next probably will be what would be more recognised as a statement purchase. You know, somebody who is like, we've went out and splashed 12 million quid on somebody, 8 million quid, whatever it is. Because there's no obvious spot to fill really at that point, unless you wanted an out and out, like people are kind of crying out for like a ball winning destroyer guy, which I can get. But I say the way things are now and the style of football we're playing, I don't know if that's something we need to go and spend like a huge chunk of money on, unless it's a Vinicius Souza caliber.
Yeah, I think, Patrick, there's a lot to kind of take from that in the sense that if Celtic were kind of to go out, in the transfer market and look at, doing that with whatever position it would be, you're then probably looking again to make an upgrade in each other position if you do it. So, take a Juranovic, for instance, who would be probably classed as one of these top level players. If you maybe went out and say replace Carlos Starfelt, for instance, or I don't know, or Rio Hatate or Daizen Maeda, because there will be naturally better football players out there. You're then going to need to keep doing that with each position, which I don't think Celtic's going to do, and I don't think the budget's going to allow for us to do it. Because whether we like it or not, there'll be a set budget that Ange Postecoglou have been working in. I think he's worked within it very well up to now, and we'll just see where we go. And more exchange with a loan with an option to buy. I think that's kind of got Celtic written all over it in a window where you've already spent 12 million in 2 players. This is one that, with the way that the club works with finances and blah, 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 the old spreadsheet CSC, that it'll be a guy that you can look at next summer and bring him in within that budget. But you're bringing him in. And again, I actually quite like these loans with options to buy because we've used them all really to an extent now. And he's a guy that I'm going to be talking to later on today. He's played with Matt O'Reilly at Fulham. I spoke to Peter Grant about him the other day, coached him at Fulham, and he said, he's a good kid and he always thought we go at the very level. Up until this point, Patrick, how would you rate it? Are you quite content with what Celtics did so far in the window?
Yeah. I can't remember who tweeted it. It was only a couple of days ago. So, I think someone said we've got like 57 days left until the window shuts. So it'll be about 53, 54. So you still actually get loads and loads of time. You've got like a month and a half. And, obviously the Champions League is like 4 days after the window shuts. So you're talking 2 months until the Champions League. So you've actually got loads and loads of time. As to the business we've done so far, as with Jens especially, that's like, it's a signing that we're going to make this summer, but it's also a signing we're going to make next summer when we buy him. Certainly the way the players talking. Yeah, I mean, the way the players talking, he's here for like 10 years. But, I think it's like a carter-vickers of a Jota where we bring them on loan, we've got the option to buy, that's sort of locked in, we've got a set fee. And if we're happy with what he gives us in an output sense, this season, we'll spend the money. And it's underwhelming in a sense because it's not a new player. We've had him for a season, but it's still, it feels strong. You're saying like 3 million, keep my player that we know is of a level that really excites us. Carter-Vickers, Jota. It's a real first team quality signing. You fancy them to play in Europe and domestically. So I think it's a good way of doing business, and we needed a centre back. We needed a sort of, and in my opinion, we needed a defensive midfielder. We've got one with experience, with quality. So yeah, I'm really, really quite happy with the way the business is been done.
Yeah, but again, I think all of us judge it by the end of the window. The chat room, Juranovic, I think, stirred us all into a frenzy. Even I was quite confident he'd still remain at the club. You don't want to lose anybody, and that would really be a kick in the teeth at this point in time. But Quinny, again, I'm very much half full on this one. I think we've did very well up until this point in time. If we add an extra couple in, it's going to be another very successful transfer window under Ange Postecoglou. And again, in terms of him, he's got so much credit in the bank from us as fans just now for everything he's did at the club in, just over a year. And you need to trust him to bring in the right players and do well again, which I think he will do.
I think if we don't sell anyone, it's arguably the best summer window of the 2000s or whatever, quite easily, because the incomings and some of the Maeda and the Jota obviously loan to buy situation is, whatever, but nonetheless, like normally anytime we go out and bring in a couple of guys it's normally at the end of the window for a start. We've still got like 53 days or whatever, which is amazing. It's mind-blowing how much, normally all these things are coming in the last 2 weeks of the window. But again, normally we have a big outgoing signing. Somebody we've sold for double digits, or we've sold somebody for like a record fee or whatever it might be, before we go and buy like 4 guys that are worth something. Normally we're scratching around with free transfers and cheap bargain buys and whatever. So I think if we don't sell anyone, then this is arguably the best window ever.
Yeah, I could probably say, yep, it'll be right up there. And we'll see how it goes. I'm sure we'll be back to cover it by the time that the window closes. Again, a lot of people will probably judge the window actually when we get into those Champions League football, and depending how results go. But I think up until this point, I would say, Ange Postecoglou, everything he's probably wanted, he's got so far from the board, and we've not got any issues on that side. As it started to kind of break down with Brendan Rodgers at one point, so hopefully we don't have any repeats of that situation, that lessons have been learned and may continue to move on and develop as a football club, and act as a big football club, which I think is important for Celtic to do. And we're going to be in the grandest stage of them all, dining at the top table, so we're looking forward to that. Thank you to you both for joining me. For anybody that's been watching, please do like and subscribe to the channel. We shall be back in hopefully the next couple of weeks to chat all things Celtic when the league's kicked off and the transfer window has closed. But all I can say is, Quinny, Patrick, thanks for joining me on the Celtic Here podcast.
Cheers.